to talk about managing performance. First question is, why do we even bother to manage performance? Well, clearly, there's many reasons for managing performance. And first and foremost, it helps to create an environment in which the individual is primed for the best success that they can be, which in turn informs and impacts on the collective group and the group's success and ability to achieve its overall objective. The second item is it's a chance to align priorities, set those priorities, clarify expectations, and identify any barriers. The third item is having that performance conversation. It's a chance to coach, give feedback, acknowledge the good work done, acknowledge those good ideas, give honest insights that will help enhance performance, talk about the performance, but not just what is done, but also how it is done. And it supports the development needs of the individual. Giving that honest feedback is going to help the individual and their future development. Now, we'll caveat a couple of items on here. When giving feedback, it's best to give it as close to the moment as possible rather than leave it for weeks and weeks. The feedback's lost its impact if you give it at that point. Whether the feedback is good or bad, it will lose its impact if it's belated. Secondly, many of us, certainly of a certain age, will know that have the experience where objectives are set in January, and then at the end of the year you get your school report review in December. Now, I would say in the modern world things move much quicker than that structure permits these days. So having regular check-ins rather than waiting for that quarterly review is a chance to look at those objectives and those priorities that have been set and realign them if need be. Things often change quickly. You may find by the time you've got to March, April time, those objectives you set in January really are no good, are not fit for purpose anymore. So regular conversations, regular check-ins instead of those quarterly reviews is a chance to keep things on track for what you're trying to deliver. I'd also say another big reason for moving away from that very old-fashioned structured process is that process typically ended with people fixating on their grade. They get to their end of year December return and they're given a 4 out of 5 and they're fixated on why weren't they a 5 out of 5, why am I only a 4, rather than talking about the conversation itself. So removing that structure and having regular check-ins, regular conversations in real time about these things, about the performance of the individual and coaching the individual, really moves the focus of the conversation onto the activities and the improvements rather than looking at it as a grading system. Again, very hung up on the grading system. When it comes to your own personal development, no one's going to be more interested in your own development than you are. So a good starting point is to look at a SWOT analysis of what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what are the opportunities for me for the future, what are the threats. Be honest with yourself and put those on paper. It doesn't have to be in detail, but that may help highlight where you can see yourself going. And then visualize the path for success. So if you're currently in a non-leadership position, you want to be a frontline leader, think about the things that you might need to get experience of to move you to that level. As you move from frontline leadership and your determination takes you to go to mid-level, think about the differences there between what you do at the moment and what the next level contains. Look for ways where you can fill and demonstrate evidence that you're able to fill those gaps. And ultimately, if you're looking to get to the top of the tree and be that executive, again, look for where the shortcomings are in what you do at the moment, the gaps you're missing. Look for how you can fill them as best as possible so that you're already established before applying for the role and going through the interview process. This is very much a generic example, but comparing your strengths and weaknesses, looking at your current job description against future job descriptions, if your progression is linear, and looking to say, I really need to get some experience of these parts to fill those gaps. Now, with employees, engagement is obviously key for someone's success in role. The more engaged we are, the more we're going to give to the job. And whereas if we're switched off, is a bit of a silent resignation where you don't really give your all. You just go through the motions, do the bare minimum. So how do we set those loyalty conditions for our team, those engagement conditions? Well, it's manifold. First off, is that sense of purpose. There's a clear understanding of what I'm here to do and what the overall success of the team needs to be. Now, that can come from many pieces, from induction, from town hall, from general engagement and regular discussions about where the business is going and how you fit into that piece. By creating that foundation, the next level up is how do we make those conditions that are great for make us a great employer for the employees. With transparency and honesty, which I talk about in one of these other sessions, having the right policies, having good learning platforms, managing and upskilling people, and diversity of thought in all that we do. And this is where, in terms of people's coaching and development, that really is going to help their upskilling. They can become more invested because they can see the company cares about their future in the same way that they do, and see a path for them. And build that capability, help individuals build those career paths, help upskill, work with people on early careers to take them through that trajectory as best as possible. And ultimately, those conditions that create that engagement and that loyalty and retaining talent is knowing that there is still, when I've hit the top of my current tree, I can see a logical next step for me. I can see that I still feature in the future. I can see there is another role for me to go on to, so I don't stagnate into what I'm currently doing. So that continual growth, that placement of talent into places which will stretch people and motivate people accordingly. So these conditions of loyalty, as you can see, and a stable, loyal workforce is clearly going to be a stronger one. Many organizations do the same sort of work. What makes it different, what makes those organizations stand apart from one another, is the culture and the success that you as an individual can have within that company. If you're not getting it in your current company, you're going to go elsewhere. And that really, on the basis of that really emphasizes the need to have regular conversations about people's own development, and they can see that they are being trusted to build their own future, and have and continue to grow within their roles and their future career. So when it comes to managing performance, there are many ways of looking at this, but one way of looking at when do we need to start thinking about redeploying people, well, it may be, indicators might be based on impact people are having, high and their energy levels as well. If someone is not having much impact and they've got low energy, there may be an instance of performance management required. If someone's got low energy but they need to have a bit more high energy to really hit those high impact, we might need to reignite, so upskill people. They kind of plateau because they've learned all they need to know at the moment. Give them some new challenge that gets them energized once more. If there's low impact but high energy, maybe they're in the wrong role. Maybe we could utilize that person in a different way that's going to move them to high impact. So coach them to get the best out of things, or reassign if appropriate. And where there is that high energy, high impact, fantastic, but me to make sure that those people continue to have that high energy and high impact. So look, are there opportunities to promote? Is this the sort of individual that we can move forward on succession plans within your team? So some concepts there about how you can keep people engaged as best as possible. But I mentioned that bottom corner. We don't want to be in that bottom corner where there's low impact, low energy, or someone that's just not working out. So we can get instances where we're having to manage performance improvement. Now, performance improvement plans, they don't have to be a horror story. You probably heard the term PIP, performance improvement plan. Doesn't have to be a horror story. And the end aim should always be to support someone, get them where we want them to be. It is not to be used as a process to exit someone from the business because they're not working out. We should always be doing our utmost to try and support them. Doesn't mean to say they wouldn't get exited from the business if it really can't get them where we need them to be. But the fundamental foundation for what we should be trying to do is support and get someone on track. If for no other reason than that, one, it's an ethical thing to do, but also bonus reason for doing it. It costs a lot to hire new people, and really, do we want to do that? I don't think so. Not when we can upskill people accordingly. So with a performance improvement plan, often it's just a case of defining the requirements to steer someone back on track, discussing why those requirements aren't being met, and you may uncover that there's health issues that are affecting performance, or some other outside factor that you hadn't been aware of, which can give a completely different slant as to why performance may not have been as good as we'd have liked. If necessary, make temporary or permanent adjustments, offer solutions, provide that support. If necessary, we will get occupational health insight. Always speak to your HR partners to get that direction in such circumstances. Once we have a performance improvement plan in place with clear requirements and knowing what needs to be done and giving the support, the tools, the training that's required to help someone get towards those meeting those requirements, then we would regularly measure and review. Now, all being well, it will put people back on track and the PIP can stop. But if not progressing as hoped, then we need to repeat that process, but in a formal manner. So we go back to the start, define the requirements once more, discuss why they're not being met, make adjustments if we haven't already, and then measure and review once more. If we're still finding it's unsuccessful, then it may be a case of going through a sanction, a penalty, to warn people essentially that if we can't get this back on track, we may have no option but to end someone's employment. But at this stage, we're just letting people know that could be an outcome, and the desire is still to try and support someone to get them to where we want them to be. If there is still no improvement, then we may need to escalate to the next level of penalty or warning. I don't like the use of the term penalty, but certainly sometimes policies do use those terminologies, sanction, penalty. But it'd be a warning, say if we really can't get this back on track, we may have no option but to exit you from the business. But that is always the last resort. And if we're still at this stage, we go back to the start, we do it once more, till eventually we get to the point where we've gone through every level of penalty that there is. And at that point, there may be no option but to dismiss someone because they're just not the right fit for the business. As with any dismissal, someone would have the right to appeal, so it's not something we take lightly. And I cannot stress enough that a performance improvement plan should always aim to be corrective, not punitive. Now, when dealing with disgruntled employees, one piece approach to deal with this is first off, clarify the problem. What's the cause of the disgruntlement? The employee, the disgruntled party, has four options, and there are only four options. They can put up with it and just put up, shut up, get on with it. They can try and change the situation, and I talk about influencing in one of the other sessions I'm doing in this series of events. They can look at things from a completely different point of view, change their viewpoint so that they actually see the things differently. They may not be so disgruntled. And if they're really unhappy, they can always exit the situation. And that could be as extreme as leaving their current employer for another job. In those situations, the employee has those four options. As a manager, the person will choose the option, but the manager has to manage it. However, when discussing the disgruntlement, does the individual bring a new perspective that requires you to change the situation and understand it with empathy and look at it with a different, fresh viewpoint?